Hi, welcome back to Radio Decidendi. I'm Krishna. Today we're going to be discussing a very recent controversy that seems to have taken the internet by storm. And that's the so-called dog ban in India. So I believe there's a lot of misunderstanding among the general public as to the nature of this ban. So I wanted to take this up for discussion to clear some stuff up. As you and I both know, it isn't really a ban on dogs, it's a ban on breeding of certain breeds of dogs. Which I think is a good thing, since all dogs which are banned are pedigree breeds which have a very long history of inbreeding, which results in a lot of suffering for these dogs because they get all kinds of diseases, frequent onsets of cancers, breathing problems, for example in the case of pugs, low life expectancy in general, etc. So now, before we get into the nitty-gritty details of the dog breeding ban, I wanted to jump into what social media has had to say about it, because that's where we get the idea of these misconceptions to begin. So, My316 says that, so now dogs are more dangerous than criminals and are so-called politicians. Shame on our government. So this is exactly what I was talking about. So, danger here refers to the fact that this ban, the controversial part of this dog breeding ban is that it's targeted at selective breeds of dogs which have been dubbed by the government as ferocious or dangerous. Now, I want to get it clear right away that there's no such thing as a dangerous dog breed or a dangerous, subspecies of dog or anything like that. It's just that these dogs tend to be bred in puppy mills, which are essentially like, it's forced slavery in a sense, and these dogs go through a lot of abuse from the time they're born. If they're female, it's even worse for them because they are kept for future litter farms, puppy farms, things like that, often in very unhygienic conditions. I've seen and experienced cases where dogs have literal maggots crawling over them with exposed flesh wounds, and still they're just exploited for new puppies because they just keep getting pregnant. People force them to get pregnant. So that's where these dogs might become a little more aggressive, because they've just experienced that sort of a horrible life, and people always tend to mislook this fact. So moving on, Choi Ying in the building says, instead of banning dogs, why don't you ban the people that throw holy on the poor dogs and harm them? You can also ban the dogs with thick fur instead, because in many places in India, Bangalore/Delhi are too hot for them. Again, this is not a matter of banning dogs. The government is not going to come to your house and abduct your Rottweiler and put your Rottweiler to death. That's not what's going to happen. The dog breeding ban, it is also something that's celebrated amongst the animal rights community, because a lot of these European, a lot of these American, foreign dog breeds, they go through a lot of suffering in their lives. It's not just the commercial exploitation that these dogs go through. It's also the fact that they have shorter lives than Indian dogs. Indian dogs, they might live for 10, 12 years in the streets. At home, they might live for 15, 18 years. So it's always better to, adopt an Indie dog. So it's not a ban on the dog. It's a ban on dog breeding to end the practice of, puppy mills and whatnot. But the problem is that it's a ban of 23 specific dog breeds. It should be much wider. You should ban all kinds of dogs under this. You should ban dog breeding. You should ban golden retrievers. You should ban Labrador retrievers. You should ban Shih Tzus. You should ban anything that's pedigree, because none of these dogs live good lives. I've seen it. Indian dogs don't fall sick as easy as these dogs do. Next comment is Royal Prince Bhuvanan. This is exactly what I'm talking about. After 7 to 8 years, those are only memories. I've experienced this. It's heartbreaking. These dogs, not many of them are built to last long because they are inbred. They don't have good genetics. They fall sick easily. It's a variety of diseases I cannot even begin to, encapsulate. Moving on, Saumya says that, how about rapists and criminals? Ain't they dangerous? How about molesters? How about those people who keep roaming around freely under the guise of gentlemen who are actually monsters? And interestingly, this has gotten 47,500 likes on Instagram, and I don't understand this whataboutism, because we are clearly dealing with an issue of animal exploitation here. I don't know what this comment is getting at. I've seen a lot of comments like this. I don't understand where these people are coming from, because we do deal with rapists and criminals under our laws, and this is an issue which animal rights advocates have fought for years, and it's only recently that the government has actually tried to come out and ban these dog breeds, which is actually great. It does have its flaws, which I'll get to, but it's a great step. It should definitely be carried through more comprehensively. Definitely more breeds should be brought under this. But the challenge is this. The government's justification for banning these dog breeds is that they're dangerous, and that's just untrue. No single breed of dog can be called dangerous in that sense. Like I said before, it's just that these dogs are bred in highly abusive puppy mills in succession. Sort of like a brothel, to be honest. So people who breed dogs, in my eyes, are no different from pimps. Imagine the kind of trauma that this would put on any living creature. Being put through successive breeding, being ripped apart from your family as soon as you're born, going to people that will most likely abandon you, throw you onto the streets, beat you. It's so common in Indian society. I've seen this so many times. And ultimately though, while I do disagree that saying that these dog breeds are ferocious, I do disagree with the government's condition that these dog breeds are ferocious. But I nevertheless unequivocally support the ban on breeding and selling these dogs for two reasons. Like I said, the unchecked cruelty and exploitation that these animals go through, and how these pedigree breeds are always susceptible to diseases like cancer, megaloesophagus, and for example, in the case of pugs, their morphology actually makes it difficult for them to even breathe with ease as they age. So naturally, the solution I propose is not just to breed these 23 pedigree dog breeds. I would want to ban all of them and just focus on adopting Indian bred dogs. There is a catch to this though, and this is something which was expressed by this comment on Instagram. So Srijit Ravindran says, of all the things mentioned, the last line is my most feared one. There are so many breeders in the country that I cannot imagine what they're going to do with all the female puppies of those 23 breeds that were banned. They will be thrown out onto the streets as they are of no use to the breeders. I hope there are some actions taken under these circumstances as well. And I completely agree with this. All these dog breeds should be banned. We need to be mindful of what will happen to the puppies of these dogs. The government needs to come up with some kind of scheme or some kind of guidelines on how to get these puppies away from breeders and adopted, because female puppies are used for further breeding mostly. Some of them are sold, many of them are not. Many of them are forced to be a part of this brothel system of dog breeding. Since these dog breeds have been banned, it's more than likely that these puppies are going to get thrown out onto the streets or buried alive or killed. I cannot imagine the horrors that will follow. Ban on pedigree dogs needs to come with a mechanism to make sure that all these dogs which are no longer commercially exploitable can be adopted and are adopted, and it needs to be government sponsored. But now, unfortunately, the order of banning these pedigree dog breeds has been stayed by the Karnataka High Court. The grounds was that the order did not take into consideration the views of all stakeholders. Now, it's sort of quoted that all stakeholders means the Kennel Club of India and its various local chapters. So let me just read an extract from this article from SEC Online. Noticing that the Delhi High Court's order was unequivocal in directing that all stakeholders must be consulted before the consideration of representation for banning dog breeds, Mr. Justice Nagaprasanna said that there is a need to examine the documents for the decision-making process to ascertain whether the Kennel Club of India was consulted, as consultation with all stakeholders was essential. Now, I'm not a fan of the Kennel Club of India. I do not support what they do. But the law behind it is essentially this. According to administrative law, the court can stay this order solely to ensure that the government has consulted and made its decision to ban the breeding of these select pedigree dog breeds on relevant grounds. The grounds cannot be entirely irrelevant from the matter at hand. But as long as the decision is not arbitrary and is made on relevant grounds, the court cannot question the decision of the government even if it disagrees with the government's stance on the issue. But essentially, what I'm trying to say here is that if the court comes to the conclusion that the government of India has made this decision by consulting relevant stakeholders and has taken considerations into mind, there is really nothing which will stop the implementation of this order. That's because this is so this law was not brought about by the Parliament of India. It was brought directly through the executive, through the government of India, and according to principles of administrative law, because it's the executive and not the legislature, and the executive is less representative of the people, you need to go through all of these stakeholder consultations and whatnot. But largely, I feel it's more of a formality. You are not required to take stakeholder comments seriously as the government. You are entitled to act unilaterally as long as you hear these people out. So that's one respite for us. But following the Karnataka High Court's decision, the Calcutta High Court also stayed the order on the basis that the order leaves room for the sterilization of very young puppies, which could be potentially detrimental to the lives of puppies themselves. But the ban on the sale of these dogs and the commercial exploitation of these dog breeds still continues in Calcutta, thankfully. But the problem I feel in Karnataka is that the order passed by the government has been stayed as a whole. Now, today, the 31st of March, 2024, the Kerala High Court has also stayed the order partially, just the order on breeding, not the order on sale, etc. But they've not given any substantive reasons why. Essentially, they said that the Karnataka and Calcutta High Courts have stayed the order, so we stay the order too. So what I think is happening is that representatives of the Kennel Club of India all across the country are unfortunately opposing this order on various grounds. Some of these orders, like consideration for the puppies, are more valid than the fact that the Kennel Club of India has to be consulted. But unfortunately, until this issue is cleared up, the dog breed continues to be unenforced in some courts. Now, just to conclude, I want to talk a little bit more about the Kennel Club of India and the type of work that they do. And this is essentially why I say that they are not legitimate stakeholders to an issue on animal rights. Kennel Club of India has always been at the forefront of litigation that has unfortunately ended up in courts stalling progressive litigation in favor of animals. The Kennel Club of India, in my view, tends to win cases because there aren't enough committed good lawyers, or at least lawyers people, animal rights advocates can afford to have while fighting these animal rights issues. And I do plan to cover this in greater detail in a later episode, but let's take a taste of it right now. So, one case which is not very well known but incredibly important is the Amritsar Kennel Club versus Union of India. So this case is actually just a speck in a long line of cases involving the legal validity of the practice of dog shows. Now, dog shows is something I think are disgusting. I think it's ridiculous. A lot of abuse goes into it. Dog shows encompass the display of various pedigree bred canines in a competition format. And dog shows are widely criticized to be highly abusive because of the high possibility of physical abuse involved in dog training. Several dog breeds are in fact subject to inhumane practices like tail docking, cutting off the tail on Doberman pinchers, for example. That's very common. Snipping of the ears to make them more aesthetic for humans, which is illegal under the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act, but it's not like that act is being actively implemented. Animals are speechless. They cannot just go to the police station and file a complaint. And even if you file a complaint, cops are not likely to take it seriously. So that's another problem we face. The Kennel Club's primary motive is to further this industry of dog breeding. And I say this because the Kennel Club of India only allows pedigrees to be part of dog shows because there's no economic incentive for allowing indies to be a part of dog. Indie means Indian dog. Thankfully, Indian dogs are not subject to this. Also, what is interesting is that neutered and spayed dogs are completely banned from participation according to the Kennel Club's website. Which means that further establishes my point that these dog shows are just to get these dogs bred and create more money for breeders. And so there's no legitimate competition as such happening here. Now, in this case, the Animal Welfare Board of India. Now, the AWBI is a statutory body established under the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act, which is responsible for dealing with animal rights issues in India, and they sent the Kennel Club of India, a notice saying that they have to get themselves registered with the AWBI before conducting their dog show, because they are dealing with a category called performing animals. So performing animals refers to animals that perform, essentially. According to the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act of 1960, a performing animal would be an animal which would be exhibited to the public by means through sale of a public ticket. Now, instead of complying with the AWBI's rules and ensuring that the AWBI also in their circular mentioned that the Kennel Club of India has to take steps that ensure that there's no puppies being sold at this event. And rather than complying with this, they appealed this before the High Court of Punjab and Haryana, and there they contended that because a performing animal is an animal which exhibited to the public by means through a sale of a public ticket, their dog shows, because these dog shows are open to the public and don't receive tickets, would be completely exempt from the category of performing animal. As such, the case was declared in favor of the Kennel Club of India, and they held their dog show. But what was ignored here was that under Section 11 of the Act, the AWBI, through delegated legislation, came up with the Performing Animals Registration Rules 2001. And there, the definition of performing animal is so much narrower. A performing animal is, and I quote, an animal used for the purposes of entertainment to which the public would be admitted. The main difference here under the rules as compared to the main act is that here there is no requirement that you need to sell tickets for your show. So as long as you're admitting public for entertainment purposes where an animal is involved, that animal is a performing animal. So according to the rules, which the Punjab and Haryana court did not take into consideration, dogs were performing animals and they would have normally been brought under the wires of the circular. Now, unfortunately, maybe for various reasons, the lawyers for the AWBI, maybe they couldn't afford good enough lawyers or whatever. They did not advance this point before court probably, which led to the court just considering the act rather than the rules. The decision would have been made in favor of the Animal Welfare Board of India had they just pointed out the rules, but that didn't happen here. But anyway, I just wanted to bring this up to show what the Kennel Club of India is actually about. They're not, as they claim, animal lovers. They are guardians of a multi-crore industry of dog breeding in India. Very unethical, a very cruel industry. And on that note, thanks for watching. Please stay tuned for more.